Okay, welcome back. I'm Matt Dukes. This is Higher Powered Radio. And listen, I mentioned this earlier. I want you guys to feel free to check out the webpage. Check out the show page on moneytalk1010.com. You can listen to the show live streaming there if you're getting it. If you want to catch out some of the blogs that are on there, if you want to look at some of the other shows that are on the station, so you can be current. I would encourage you to go there and look at that. It's a one-stop shop for all that stuff. It's got highlights, it's got videos, it's got articles, and so it's moneytalk1010.com. So listen, we were talking about earlier a lot of the questions that come with the statistics that I read, and I got to tell you, I get overwhelmed by that stuff, and I can talk about it for the rest of the show, but I don't want to. I want to move to asking you and developing some of the thoughts about some of this stuff, because this isn't really. I don't want this to be me just giving directed or education. I really want this to be an organic conversation. So if you got something to add, you want to ask a question, you want to input something on this, by all means, give me a call. It's 888-404-1010. It's 888-404-1010. But when we look at some of this stuff that we talk about persecution, I jotted down this list of questions, and it says, so, how do we stand up for our rights and our beliefs? Because I can tell you, like I said, in a boardroom, I've had that conversation. I've had issues at the bank. I've had issues in the grocery store, and I'll be having a conversation, and you get the looks, and you get the innuendos, and you get the snide comments, and you get the remarks, and you get the judgments, and and so I just want to make sure that as we start to think about, do I have the courage to express my faith? I told you at the beginning of the show, Matthew 28 talks about, Jesus said, listen, go forth and make disciples to the ends of the earth. And that's simply sharing with somebody what you've done, to the point that they then plug in, they believe, and then they want to start growing. And so it's nothing more complicated than that. Listen, God never intended for the relationship with him to be this insurmountable act of tasks that we learn to perfect so that we become good enough for him to pay attention. That's just absurd. And it is amazing to me how that got perpetrated through history, because it all got done under the guise or premise of, if you do it my way, then you'll be okay. And by the way, pay me for that. And so, or buy your way in. And that's, listen, man, that's the whole other conversation where we're going to have some other day about, the corruption of the establishment of religion. And so I got to ponder some of this stuff for a little bit, where I started to think about, what would I do? How do I defend myself in those circumstances? Because I know I talked about last month or a couple weeks ago, in my youth, and having this conversation, and I say my youth was my 30s, so that was young enough, but I got confrontational with somebody because I started to become very adamant about, no, man, I believe this, and this is, it says this in the fact that they, were much better educated than I was, to the point that they even said to me, listen, that's okay. If you're still going to debate it at a sophomoric level versus a collegiate, that's okay. Go study some more. And I was humiliated. And so what happens sometimes, and it's by human nature, becoming vulnerable, becoming humiliated, I shut my mouth and I don't say anything again. And so my question then is, and this is to foster that thought process, what do you say? How have you expressed your faith and then defended it? Specifically when somebody says, well, that's bullshit, or excuse me, I don't believe that. That's just garbage. Or when they say, hey, listen, how can you prove that? How do you prove it? How do you defend that after expressing, oh yeah, I go to church, and then they look at you and go, yeah, the church is a bunch of hypocrites. Yeah, actually, pretty much it is. And so I told somebody the other day, we were talking about going to church, and she said, well, why don't you go to church more? And I said, well, do you understand why most people don't go to church? And she said, no. And I said, because they've been to church. And so it's interesting how we want to present it in this light of, God's grace and love and that good feeling, and oh my gosh, and we get to go sing and praise and worship, and then it's full of people that are screaming at their kids by the time they get them in the car in the parking lot. or someone there that's, still struggling with their addictions, or someone there that's still struggling with pornography, or someone there that's having listen, I can tell you, church is full of people that need to be in church. It sure ain't full of people that don't need to be there, because I can tell you what, God said we all fall short. We all are never going to be able to achieve what ideally that's supposed to look at. But more importantly, and I want to stay on topic with this, because as we start to think about, how do I defend my belief, my faith? Do I know the answers enough to have an intelligent conversation when somebody says simply, why are there 13 names on a list instead of 12 apostles? Right? And so I'm grateful that we had a caller call in about that. And so, and I'm sure there's other people that knew that. But do you know how to describe the basic tenets of baptism? Right? What is it? What does it mean? Let's talk about salvation. What do you mean salvation? What do you mean when I say to you, all you got to do is accept Jesus in your heart? And they go, what the heck does that mean? How do you do that? Well, just surrender yourself. That's absurd. Why do I have to surrender? Do you know what that means to yourself? Can you articulate that in a way that makes sense to somebody? What does it mean when you start to get persecuted? And I don't mean physically, I mean verbally. When somebody starts to say, hey, that's not okay that you talk about that here. You're not allowed to do that. You shouldn't be able to do. What protection do we have under the law? And I want to make sure I mention this, because this is I looked this up specifically. This is the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. This says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibit the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the press or the right of the people peacefully to assemble or to petition the government for a redress of grievance. I am allowed to talk about whatever I want to talk about. And so I want to make sure that you know that it's okay if you choose to do that. I want to encourage you to do that. What I want to encourage you to do is read enough and have an understanding and be able to address it in a way that's articulate, comprehensible, accurate, right? Now listen, God said very clearly, don't worry about what you're supposed to say when they call you in front of the judges and the courts and the rulers. The Holy Spirit will give you what to say. Have confidence in that. Have a lot of faith in that. But I can tell you, it's difficult. And there was an old saying going around where I grew up in Northwest Ohio, because there's a big Amish area up there too. And I was not Amish. I didn't get raised Amish. But what they did say is there was an old story about an old Amish guy. He said, listen, if you pray for potatoes, you better go pick up a rake. And obviously, it means you got to put the work into this. So I want to encourage you to make sure that you guys are following through on the things that you say to us. And I'm talking about New Year's resolutions. I'm talking about making sure you're going out there and growing your faith. Listen, I'm Matt Dukes. This is Higher Powered Radio. It's been great. I'll see you next week.